Chapter 11. A charred, battered, and smoking metal hulk screeched and scraped, spewing sparks for a half a mile before completely collapsing on the secondary runway of the Shadow Proclamation outpost. Inside, the hundreds of confused, lacerated, disoriented crew members of the Coreopsis Charybdis wandered toward the exits. Outside on the platform, emergency crews arrived to put out the fire and tend to the wounded. The entity in charge was a middle-aged woman, an albino with snow-white hair. Her look was severe as she surveyed the destruction on her temporal landing pad. She peered about angrily through bloodshot pink eyes for the Time Lord who, she knew, must be responsible. When the emergency Jadoon squads arrived to aid the Charybdis survivors, all of them shocked to be helped and offered first aid by a talking rhinoceros. A phone booth materialized beside the nearly totaled smoking vessel. It was a red phone booth, not what the albino servant expected. She didn't care. She was going to give the Time Lord a piece of her mind. "Doctor!" she shouted as the man in red exited. "No, not really, no." He looked around and closed the door behind him, then answered rather hopefully. "But I do think those large gentlemen over there with the horns may be medics." "You're not the doctor." "Yes." The alien in the scarlet suit nodded. "I think I already covered that." The Shadow Proclamation's surrogate voice, this garish woman, known only as the albino servant, stared at the Time Lord, up and down. "Ah, yes, the Crimson Arm of Time. I was told by the Shadow Architect to be expecting you." "First, I'm not the Crimson Arm of Time. The Crimson Arm is just a temporal watch, all right? Second, who is this architect?" The servant interrupted. "I have a mission for you." That was pretty fast. The alien removed his scarlet fedora and ran his fingers through his dark hair. She walked up to him slowly, taking his hand and placing a strip of psychic paper in his palm, closing his fingers around it. "This incident is a mystery to the Shadow Proclamation, more specifically, a blemish to the Shadow Architect himself, and he wishes for you to investigate." "I'm not a space Sherlock Holmes. I have other—" Abruptly, she was very close to his face. For the first time since he could remember, the Time Lord experienced a vague intimidation. He did not appreciate it. "Look," he sighed, "I've been jumping through hoops for this architect character, never knowing why I'm going on these missions, never understanding what it is I'm being groomed for." "You expect me to provide this information?" the servant demanded incredulously. "Such is not our lot, sir. I am a surrogate and a warden of the Shadow Proclamation. You are—" She trailed off. The woman stared at him for a very long time. "I am what, exactly?" The man in red seemed bored, rather than perturbed now. "An accident? A mistake? A lucky bastard? A temporal errand boy?" "Not for me to say. We follow our paths. We do what we must." The alien coughed. "We do what we must, right. You don't know what you're saying. All these missions, fighting the temporal mortars, starting with the wrathful angels." Finished with listening, the albino servant turned to leave. As she walked away, she mentioned, "We'll restore the remainder of the always lovely Maelstrom survivors to the proper time in 2567, back on Earth with proper memory wipes. So don't worry about fixing that particular little problem." "Did I appear worried?" The man in red wanted answers. He wasn't going to get any. Shaking his head, he gripped the psychic paper with the coordinates to his next destination and stared at the Coreopsis Charybdis. Remarkably, none of the injuries of the 400 crew members were severe, and there were no deaths. Outside the crashed ship, Zhang, Navi, and Werlich grouped together as they watched the Jadoon military entourage find and withdraw the wayward temporal mortars. John Hart was being led away in electrical shackles, followed by his goons, Rawl and Fichakio. Last to be pulled from the wreckage was the former captain, Nis Hark. The group of space criminals stared at the man in red from a distance. He waved. "I know your name," John shouted from afar. "I'll find you again. You're High Lord, aren't you?" The man in red turned away, instead looking at Purge. "You're Gallifreyan. I know you're Time Lord. I'll find you, and when I do—" Private Hart His goons and his self-mutinous love interest were bundled away forcefully into a Jadoon police cruiser to be taken away for further interrogation.
Times like this, I wish the Corsair was still alive,
the Time Lord muttered under his breath. Purge's door popped open. D3 and Stu walked out onto the Shadow Proclamation platform as the stranger in the scarlet suit stepped back.
All right,
D3 announced.
You know, I love Purge and time travel and all that, but I think I'm gonna go back to Earth.
The man in red shrugged.
But Earth isn't your home, and Mercury's gone.
D3 sighed and gently placed her arms around him.
It is becoming more and more dangerous hanging out with you, traveler.
She kissed him softly on the cheek, then stepped away.
Stu's gonna show me around Earth. I think I've had plenty of near heart attacks running around this time and space thing for a while.
That time machine of yours, Stu began excitedly. Unbelievable how much bigger it is on the ins.
Yeah, take a deep breath now, Slappy.
The Time Lord held up his hand, silenced the engineer, then turned back to Dawn.
Are you sure? We have so many places you haven't visited yet, like...
D3 shook her head.
Like the time I was taken over by your renegade time lady nemesis? You know, the time I died?
Alright, okay, I get it.
The alien smiled very sadly.
I'll miss you, Dawn.
Good. I will accept this one last lie from you.
She grinned, took Stu's arm, and walked away toward the rest of the Coriolis, sure of the survivors. From there, she would be sent back to Earth in 2567 to live out her life, have her own adventures, without the traveler. The man in red hadn't noticed Sully standing behind him. The retired Commodore patted him on the shoulder.
Come on, lad. Let's get headed out.
The Time Lord followed his friend into their red time machine, as Sully offered.
Maybe now we can discuss why time travel is so bloody hard for you.
Purge's door closed, and the man in red was gone.